So we're starting a new series about cultivating peace. It's challenging in a world where it appears that everything's falling apart. There's so many changes happening. And then we have in our own lives, our own things that happen. Like just personally, I have some testing coming up in a few weeks, so I've had to go off all of my medication. So all of my systems are freaking out. They don't know what to do. Which is why you have to go off of the meds in advance so you can settle before the actual test happens. But it's been very interesting to watch my body as this one little microcosm of systems going haywire and finding that still point within. And then on the macrocosm level, watching the world systems all go haywire as they try to seek balance. And again, even if my focus expands to that world system, there's this point of stillness. And that is what we want to cultivate. This peace. When I first started meditating, it was all about just joy. Just I wanted to feel good. It was like life gets too heavy. It's frustrating. Things don't go the way I want, and I just want to be happy. And I had one boss tell me I had happy genes, because no matter what happens, I would like go through a thing and then come back and be happy. And so I really enjoyed that feeling of just being happy and high. And before I ever met my teacher, I knew that if I just sat and did nothing, which is weird, but I just, because I had never heard of the word meditation, this is the 70s and 80s, in a very small town. Never heard of Buddhism or anything like that. But there was something in me that knew if everything's going crazy, everything's out of balance, if I just sat still, there was this spaciousness that exists. And that exists for all of us, no matter what is happening, no matter what is occurring in the world system, in the cosmic system, or in our personal system. There is this wonderful spaciousness in which we live. And when I entered into that spaciousness, there's that innate joy would just bubble up and I'd be happy again. And that was enough. And I was like, okay, I'm back. My happy genes are back on. And then I could go back into the fray, back into the tornado of life, do all the things. And then I started to notice that cycle of like, okay, I'd be happy, and then I'd get beat up and spit out and be miserable, and then I could be happy, and then I get beat up and spit out, miserable, and just cycling through that. So at that point, I hit college, and I was like, okay, there's got to be something more. There's got to be something that makes sense, makes all this make sense. I didn't have words for what I was looking for. I just knew I was looking for something. I explored a lot, found a lot of duds, and gave up. Completely gave up. Said, nope, it's not possible. This is just how life is. We're just going to have this cycle of misery and joy, misery and joy, misery and joy. And that's it. And I accepted it. I was like, okay, that's it. And then life is the perfect teacher, always, and brought me to my teacher, who actually showed me meditation and Buddhism and why it makes sense to cultivate a daily practice. Because we start off in this cycle of going up and down, up and down, up and down. But when we meditate every day, when we practice mindfulness every day, when we actually contemplate what's happening in our mind, the down portion of the ups and downs elevates. It's a very interesting process that happens as we devote time and energy to the practice. You know, initially we might have these really wide sweeps where we go up, then we go down, we go up, and we go down. But then as we practice more and more, we notice that maybe we're not going down quite as far. We catch ourselves, like, oh, we're heading into the gutter, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, let me focus on that spaciousness for a moment. And we plug into that innate joy, and then all of a sudden we're going back up. So those lows, we don't hit them as deeply or as long. We might still hit the floor, but then we bounce right back up. So if you were to graph it, the overall trend is this expansion into a higher state of being. And eventually, we start to see through this cycle. We start to see that we don't have to be addicted to the joy, that there's something even beyond joy. And that's peace. There's this sense of equanimity, is what they call it in Buddhism, where you're aware of this spiking up and down, where, okay, I've got everything figured out, all my systems are in balance, everything's good, I'm happy, and then everything crashes, and oh, it's all a mess. And so we go through these cycles, but we learn through the practice to hold our attention in the center of that tornado, in the center of that rising and falling. And it allows us to cultivate this sense of peace, where there's I don't want to say acceptance, because that's not the right word. You know, this knowing that even as everything's shifting and changing, there's still essential goodness, for lack of a better word. There's still light. And when we operate from that center, our actions are very different than when we operate from when we're in the spin cycle of going up and down, up and down. Because when we're caught in that cycle of everything's great, everything's miserable, everything's great, everything's miserable, if we observe how the mind works, if we're in the upside of that cycle of everything's great, we tend to be very generous, very kind, very open, very excited about life. And then when we're on the downside, where everything's miserable, then we get very closed in, we get very territorial, we can be very cruel sometimes. We say, oh, I didn't mean to, I'm just, all porcupined. And you have lots of spikiness. So those arise out of that centering our being on that cycle. But through practice, we can actually center our being on the center where that's that peace, that equanimity is. So it doesn't mean we go totally passive and we do nothing. We just sit there and watch the world go by, because we have bodies that want to move, even if we don't want them to. They're gonna do stuff. But we're able to act from a place of balance, where it allows us to observe a situation and then pick a course that's going to be most beneficial to all. And it's not usually an intellectual understanding. It's a presence. It's just being in that full present moment, allowing your mind to be fully aware of everything that's happening, all the different feelings and all the different thoughts that are arising, all the different disturbances that are happening within you and around you, and trusting that soft, quiet center to know, oh, this needs to be done. And oh, look, I can do it. And you just do. And this is a way of life. It's not something we do once and then we get pats on the back and say, oh yes, I did it. It's a practice. So some days we'll be really, really good at it, and we'll just be, as they say, living in flow, living in alignment with everything. And you just weave through all of the different disturbances, and in your wake there's this energy of peace that just radiates out, and it affects everything else. So this practice that we do is not just for you, it's for everyone. It has a cosmic benefit, if you will. So this practice of cultivating peace allows us to become more in tune with that which what we truly are. Of course, to do it, we have to release our addiction to joy. We have to go beyond bliss. So this is something I would call an intermediate to advanced stage of practice. If you're just starting off with your practice, then just go for joy. Just focus on learning how to recognize and bring yourself into that state of joy through the different practices of meditation, mindfulness, contemplation. Where meditation, we go into silence and stillness. That's where everything that we think we are just naturally melts. All those constructs that we have about how the world should be and how we should be. When we enter into the silence of meditation, all of that just very gently melts. We don't want to force that, because then we run into other problems, but allow it to be a natural process. And in doing so, that innate joy will bubble up. You'll recognize it, like, oh, yeah, there's joy here. Through mindfulness, our practice we do when we're not sitting on the cushion. That's the paying attention to our mind and watching where it's taking us, and noticing, are we in a great state of mind, or are we in the gutter? Are we heading into the gutter? That's always good to catch yourself heading in there. But even if you're full on in the crappiest mind state possible, that's a cause for celebration. And this is a very important point. When you're in a bad state, when you're just feeling completely miserable, the recognition that you are is cause for celebration. And I really want you to encourage you every time you notice, wow, I'm in a really dark place, or I'm really angry and out of control, I'm really miserable, or I'm just really suffering. To have that recognition is huge, because so many people never have that recognition. And without that recognition, guess what? You just stay there. And you dig deeper, and you find further depths of misery. And it just keeps going deeper and darker and darker. But the moment that we recognize where we're at, it's like, oh, freaking miserable. Cool. Now I can do something about it. Because if you have no awareness of where you're at, there's nothing you can do. You're just caught in the cycle of karma. You're just going to keep digging. But the moment there's that recognition, that's light. That's the light of awareness, literally. Saying, oh, this is where I am. And then naturally the next question is, what can I do about it? Do I need to meditate and sit for a bit? Do I need to just refocus my mind on beauty or gratitude? Those are very powerful keys, because they exist in every state of mind, which is very interesting. The beauty in a very dark state of mind is very different than the beauty of a very high state of mind, but it's still beauty. And by latching the attention onto beauty or gratitude, it brings us back into the up cycle. Brings us back closer to joy. As we do this and pay attention, enough time we go on that ride with awareness, enough times where we're actually willing to pay attention to that happening, we start to notice patterns. And that's where contemplation comes in. That's where we set aside a little bit of time and say, you know what? Every time I run into that guy at the office, I just get spun out. I wound up miserable. Or every time I go into the grocery store, I just get completely drained. And that's an indication that there's something happening within the system, within your personal system, that is not adapting, that is stuck. So if a good technique is to just write down as concisely as possible what you perceive the issue to be. Write it down on a little card and say, I get drained every time I go in the grocery store. And then write it down. Let yourself meditate for 5 or 10 minutes. And then pick up your card and set the timer for 5 or 10 minutes. And then just look at the situation. Contemplate. If other thoughts come in your mind, you just go back to what it is that you're looking at. And this way, you allow your mind to kind of dig through all the different feelings, the emotions, the sensations, the thoughts that are related to that situation. You start to see the hang-ups. You start to see where your body just tenses up, where you cling. And just by looking and observing where you're clinging, where you're holding on so tightly, that light of awareness just allows it to loosen. Again, we're not going to go in there and try and rip our fingers away, because it's more like those finger traps, the little toys that had as kids. Put your fingers in, and the harder you try and pull, the tighter it gets. But this relaxing and just noticing that, oh, I'm stuck, and this is exactly where I'm stuck. And then just that relaxing allows everything to release. So this practice that we do every day will bring us into higher and higher states of joy. It will help us catch ourselves when we're falling into misery. But the goal is not to just stay high all the time. The game at that stage is when you notice that you're falling into misery, how fast can you turn it around? That's the game. And then when you're ready, let's move even beyond that into this sense of cultivating peace, where you start to rest more and more in the equanimity, in that spaciousness, where you see the cycle, where you see the ups and downs, where you see the systems going out of balance and back into balance, both within yourself and within the world. But your attention is centered in this sense of equanimity, where there's calm, where there's not that anxiety of like, oh, I've got to fix it. But it's not passivity either, because sometimes there is something that we can do that will be a benefit. So it's this interesting place of internal balance that we can reach and then move through the world in a completely different way than most people do. So this is the beginning of cultivating peace. And of course, the first thing we can do to do that